So, Tim, if you have questions or you want to jump in, just let me know as well.
Okay, yeah, what we've been doing is just having them put the questions in Q&A and then get to them at the end there.
That's fine.
So, yeah.
Yep.
And I'll sort through and kind of group them together and that, so there's not a lot of redundancy.
Sure.
So, and if there's questions that I can answer, I usually type those in.
Yep.
So good. We've got about 10 minutes.
Just yell out if there's something that's burning and just jump in if you think it's a good opportunity.
Okay. Sounds good. All righty, we're broadcasting the webinar live now, so people are starting to jump on board. This is the Washington Academy of General Dentistry Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. We are on probably our 37th or 8th webinar so far during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've got another 15 or so scheduled. So we'll keep you busy until the May 18th go back date. We'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the University of Washington School of Dentistry, who are handling all the CE credits. Your CE credits will be sent via email in PDF format in the next 2 or 3 days. When you get that email, you'll notice that your name is not filled in on that PDF. Just, fill it in, save it for your records, and that way, if there's any problems down the road and you need proof of your CE, you have it. For those of you that are AGD members, we will be reporting your CE credit directly to the Academy of General Dentistry. So that should show up on your transcript within, 2 to 4 weeks is our expectation. Things are just really backlogged with the amount of CE credit that's going out right now with all the webinars going on. We've been very pleased with our WAGD Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. We've had over 21,000 different dentists and hygienists, assistants, etc. attend these. And these webinars are open to all dentists, hygienists, assistants, front desk, and you can receive CE credit. Just make sure we have a valid email address for you, because that's how you'll be receiving your credits from the University of Washington. Feel free to share the links for these webinars with your colleagues. If you missed a webinar or you want to review a webinar you've already seen, you can go to YouTube and to Washington Academy of General Dentistry. We have a channel there. Remember to like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and you'll be notified every time we have a new webinar. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Comet USA, Patterson Dental, Seattle King County Dental Society, Pierce County Dental Society, and Snohomish County Dental Society. I'd like to thank the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics for sharing our information and partnering with us up in the Great White North there. We appreciate it. It was a shame that the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry annual meeting had to be canceled in Halifax, but we look forward to getting back there in 2022. The Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics meeting will be in Vancouver in 2021. And that's a week offset from the International Academy of General Dentistry's our annual or biannual meeting, is in September of 2021, and that's in Seattle here. So it might be a good opportunity to come out and catch 2 meetings and get a little time off while the weather's still nice in the Pacific Northwest. And the details for those meetings are on the websites. This has been the International Academy of Nathology Day here with the Washington Academy of General Dentistry Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. We thank the IAG for putting together our 3 speakers today. And we look forward to our 3 speakers tomorrow with the Arkansas Academy of General Dentistry. Thank you to Dr. Kenton Ross from Arkansas for putting that group together. And then on Thursday, we've got the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics. It's Card P Day, and we've got 3 more speakers there as well. You'll notice that we also this Wednesday have the Brays are back to discuss everything from PPP loans to HR type stuff. And then we have Terry Harris, who's back going to do a replay of his lecture he did last week, but there might be some updated information depending if there's been any updates from the Dental Quality Assurance Commission, Department of Health, WISHA, or the state of Washington. So right now, we don't know if there's any new information, but he's staying on top of that. Dr. Karbosh is going to be with us on Friday talking about how to get your offices ready to get up and see patients on May 18th. So looking forward to her information. She's put a lot of time into that, and we've talked back and forth on some ideas. So I think that'll be a valuable one that you want to share with your team members. We've got some courses, webinars planned for next week. We don't have those up yet on our flyers. We're trying to finalize the details on those, but make sure you go to washingtonagd.org over the next few days, and as those courses come available, we'll put them up on the website. We appreciate all of you that have joined us over the weeks here, and I'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Gary Hayamoto and our Executive Director, Valerie Bartoli from the Washington Academy of General Dentistry. Thank you to Dr. Pressett for getting the information up on the website as it becomes available, and we'd like to thank the University of Washington School of Dentistry CE Department for getting all these CE credits out to everybody. If you have an issue with CE credit, the best people to contact are the University of Washington School of Dentistry CE department, but give them a little bit of time. They're backlogged on getting those CE credits out. I think they're up to working on Fridays from last week now. So be patient. We'll get those CE credits out to you. We've got about 4 minutes before Dr. Giblin is, we're going to introduce him formally. We've got about half of our participants have joined us, so welcome. And we would like to thank, again, all the organizations that have put together speakers for us for this week: the International Academy of Gnathology, the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics, and the Arkansas Academy of General Dentistry. Hey, if you had questions for Terry Harris, there's a link, his email, agd-covid@harrisbiomedical.net. He's already received thousands of email questions. He's putting those together again for his Wednesday repeat update lecture there. So you're welcome to send him an email, but my guess is by now he's being asked your question 35 different times in 45 different ways. So anyways, again, thank you to all our presenters. All the presenters have agreed to do these webinars with no honorariums. We appreciate that because quite frankly, right now with the lockdown everybody's in, we didn't have the financial means to do that. I'd like to thank the Academy of General Dentistry UW student chapter for suggesting our speaker, Dr. Ann, last Thursday did a wonderful job on intraoral scanning. You'll want to go to YouTube, to the Washington Academy of General Dentistry channel and take a look at that. That's a great lecture for anybody that has an intraoral scanner in their office or is thinking about getting one. And it's a great way to train staff members. We have a Facebook page. It's Washington Academy of General Dentistry. Please feel free to look us up. Would love if you could subscribe. And with these flyers that are going by for upcoming courses, just use those QR codes to get registered, similar to what you've done to get to these webinars today. If you miss one of those QR codes, go to washingtonagd.org. All that information should be present there for you. We would, again, remind you that CE credit will be coming from the University of Washington School of Dentistry in a few days. It will not be coming from the WAGD. So if you get something from the University of Washington, make sure you open that up. It'll have a PDF that you can put your information in so you have confirmation of your CE credit. For those of you that are new to Zoom, kind of look around the interface. There's chat features, there's Q&A feature, there's a hands up feature. We're not going to use the hand up feature. The chat feature is for information from Dr. Hayamoto will be typing information in there. The Q&A, if you have a question, that's where you'll put your question for Dr. Giblin. And we have the ability to upvote. So if you're looking at those questions in the Q&A and you have a question that you want to make sure he gets to, just use that thumbs up and we'll upvote that topic. And hopefully Dr. Giblin will be able to get to the bulk of your questions. We've given him 2 hours, so he should have time to do his presentation and take some of those questions. And we appreciate Dr. Giblin immensely. You have to understand he's in the Australia right now, so we appreciate him working with the time change and helping us out to do this webinar today. Well, it looks like we're past 2:30, so let's just do our formal introductions. This is the Washington Academy of General Dentistry Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE series. All the CE is coming to you free as a membership benefit for being a member of the Academy of General Dentistry, but we welcome dentists, hygienists, assistants, and staff members that are not AGD members. We want to thank our partners for co-sponsoring these webinars. That's the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics. It's Comet USA. It's the Patterson Dental. We have Snohomish County Dental Society, Pierce County Dental Society, Seattle King County Dental Society. And of course, we couldn't be doing this without the University of Washington School of Dentistry, CE. Thank you very much for your support handling the CE credits. Today's 3 speakers are sponsored or promoted or basically arm twisted by the International Academy in Athology. Thank you, Dr. Paul Hasegawa, for putting together these 3 speakers. Tomorrow we have the Arkansas Academy of General Dentistry has 3 speakers put together for us, and then Thursday the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics has their 3 speakers. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Thomas Giblin. He'll be talking about incorporating digital dentistry into the modern practice. Dr. Giblin graduated from the University of Sydney's Bachelor of Dentistry with honors in 2004. After working in private practice, he was admitted to the University of Texas Health Sciences Center at San Antonio in the Graduate Advanced Prosthodontics program. Dr. Giblin is interested in many areas of dentistry, but has a heavy focus on dental implants, occlusion, and aesthetic dentistry. Dr. Giblin is also very interested in the technical aspects of prosthodontics, and his practice has its own full-service dental laboratory with the latest in sophisticated CAD/CAM technology utilized in his mainly digital workflow. Dr. Giblin is also a member of many dental societies, both in Australia and overseas, lectures to other dentists and specialists, both locally and internationally. He is a member, fellow, and diplomat of the International Congress of Oral Implantologists, the largest implant organization in the world, and is an examiner with that organization. He was also recently announced as the ICOI president-elect. He currently sits on the Federal Executive Committee of the Australian Society of Implant Dentistry. Welcome, Dr. Giblin. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. yeah, I just going to get this one going. All right. Okay.
So what time are we at there in Australia?
It's 7:30 in the morning. We come to you from the future. Wishing you guys a happy May the 4th. We're now closer to Cinco de Mayo, I think, than Star Wars Day. But yeah, you can see that slide okay?
We do not have you up right now.
Okay.
So let me just double check. Dr. Hayamoto, you're not seeing a slide there? I just want to, no, not yet. No.
I'm not either.
Oh,
Dr.
yeah,
Tess.
not yet. Now,
Beautiful.
if he hits run, we got it.
There
May
we
the
go.
4th be with you, Dr. Giblin.
Exactly. So, yeah, so today I'm going to be chatting about incorporating digital dentistry into the modern dental practice. Obviously, it is May the 4th there. So I thought this one was quite apt. But yeah, so I guess Tim's covered up a lot on about me. I did, I think, I graduated from San Antonio as a prosthodontist in 2010 and been working in private practice since then, with a fairly large focus on implant reconstructive and aesthetic dentistry. I will go through this. I do have some, I've previously been a paid lecturer for BioHorizons, Southern Ontario, TRI and Core 3D, and I'm a current consultant for Itera. So just getting that out of the way. So I'd like to thank the IAG, International Academy of Pathology, for the invitation to chat to you today. There's definitely a bit of an international flavour, I think. You've had I guess in Australia now, you had an Irishman before and a Texan, so 3 funny talkers on top of Dr. Hess. So, so it's definitely an international flavour today. So I've been very lucky to have some great mentors through my career. I think the 3 speakers today have all got that San Antonio background to them. And I think probably my 2 biggest mentors are probably Dr. Bob Cronin and Dr. Bill McCorris. But through that, some of the other mentors I've got there, Dr. Melkers and various others, Dr. Turbeville. So I was very lucky to learn from a lot of great mentors down in San Antonio and throughout my career. I would encourage everyone to potentially consider visiting an ethology meeting. It's a great time. It's every couple of years. It's a great bunch of dentists. That's how I've met a lot of the guys, I guess, through Seattle and Washington. That's how I got to, I guess, get invited here, was meeting these guys, probably more so at the bar than at the meeting, but always a great bunch of people at those meetings. And I like to think, probably I've lectured for the IAG before, but I think probably my best, most valuable contribution to the society has been the introduction of goanna pulling, which is an Australian tradition, which is basically if you imagine a goanna as a large Australian lizard. So this is a test of manhood that we undergo every now and then. Anyway, more about that. So I'll get back to, so I'm basically from Sydney, Australia. I'm from the north of Sydney, a place called Palm Beach. It's a beautiful location. Set my practice up in 2012 after a couple of years mucking around after residency. I set the practice up. I did a lot of digital, sort of got into digital a lot during residency. It was kind of in its infancy back then. It was kind of a bit more challenging. I think it wasn't as easy as it was today to get things done digital, but I sort of had a bit of a passion for it. So when I commenced my practice, I sort of fitted it out, aiming for it to be a largely digital workflow. It's a very nice place to work. It's a beautiful area. I've got an addiction to gadgets, so there's a lot of screens in my place, lots of toys. I do a bit of teaching, so we have a little lecture room, lecture theatre there that we do some lectures and hands-on. I'm also very lucky to have my own lab, and this is my brother James. He's my ceramist, so I work with him. We set the lab up initially we sort of outgrew that within a year. We had to expand in next door. So this is James in our lab. It's a full service lab. So we do fixed, removable, so castings, crown and bridge, everything. So we have Ivocap there. So we do our indentures, we do everything in-house. So it's a very compact space and very compact lab, but we can pretty much do everything in that lab. And largely due to the use of digital technology. So we've sort of outsourced or I guess got rid of a lot of the workflows that we could, to the point where James is really just kind of designing and finishing. So we'll talk about that today, and that's really what today's lecture is about, is I guess my journey through digital and also sort of recommendations, and I guess helping the audience to sort of decide how they're going to go about their digital journey if they want to, and sort of some of the things to think about. So it's kind of designed to be a lecture on, I guess, what to look about, or what to think about, and how to customize your workflow. So this is our little digital area. I've got some intraoral scanners, some benchtop scanner. I've got 3D printers. We've got all the gear there. So yeah. So when it comes to going digital, I think most of us in our lives would know, obviously we're now speaking internationally in our bedroom or in our living room. So many aspects of life have gone digital, and dentistry is the same. So we've, digital software, digital records, digital photography, everything's kind of gone a bit digital. And so there's been a very large push towards that. Digital technology makes information much easier to obtain, manage and store. I know we don't have a filing cabinet anymore at our work. Everything's digital, so it's much nicer that way. It does allow for better medical legal records, but with digital, there is often a higher initial outlay and lower ongoing costs. Now, the transition can be difficult, especially for some, but I think generally it's worth it in the end. So I guess the question then is, does digital dentistry stack up? A lot of the times we see this technology, it's quite fancy, it looks great at the trade show, but we really have to ask, does it improve accuracy, predictability, reliability and cost? And that's really where the rubber meets the road. Is it better for the patient? Okay. Does the technology fit to your situation? A lot of people will sort of, it's quite apt for some people, sometimes you'll see a bit of technology, but we sort of look at it through rose-colored glasses, and we need to make sure that it does fit the way you work and the way your practice is. One of the questions is, does your treatment dictate your tech, or does your tech dictate your treatment? And I think that's very important for some people, that, to a man with a hammer, everything's a nail. And sometimes with these expensive bits of equipment, that we will tend to drive treatment towards that rather than the treatment drive it towards technology. So is the casting age over? Okay, is digital ready? And that's really the big question. So for years, we've done very well with our traditional PFM crowns and bridges and traditional work. And, for a lot of people, the thing is, well, it's working, why would I change? And that's a very valid point. And if you've been doing something the same way without problems for a long time, then potentially just doing it the same way is the wise way to go. But are we hanging on to old techniques because they're familiar and change is hard? Okay, is the gold standard still applicable? And that's a pretty important question these days. I think we're sort of seeing in Australia definitely is the, I guess, reduction in the technical skill of our technicians, and the ability to work through these traditional techniques. The training's not there. So is casting really accurate? And we'll talk about that in a minute, but when you look at casting, it's quite a very technical process, a lot of steps, lots of areas for inaccuracy. So, is it as accurate as we have always thought, or is it something that, the top 5% can achieve really well and the rest of us are just trying to get there? And if you're not really ready for digital, the chances are that your lab has already switched and you are digital at some point. So, I guess the change is coming. It's just a matter of how quickly we're going to adapt to that. Okay. So I guess where I want to come at from this lecture is really thinking about your workflow as far as how digital will integrate into your practice. So while there are many great digital alternatives to traditional techniques, there can be issues with accuracy, precision, and cost. And some of the stuff we do see with digital is that it's so easy that we overlook a lot of the downsides of it. You know, crown margin fit was always, you know, has to be within 20 microns or 30 microns. Now it's like, well, it's 75 to 80, but, you know, it's pretty cool. We'll just put cement in there. So, you know, we've got to look at that. You know, potentially we're robbing Peter to pay Paul a little bit with some of the technology. Who's running the show? You know, is it you? Is it your lab? So when you send off a crown, you know, who's deciding what material you're using, what brand of material, what's the way they're manufacturing it? You know, are you getting pushed down a workflow because, you know, that's basically what the reps have told you is better. You know, is it actually better for you or better for the lab or better for their costs? And that's what we have to look at as well. So what's their level of skill and understanding of your situation? Sometimes we'll, you know, a rep will come in and give them the same spiel to 20 different dentists that day trying to sell the same product. But it may not actually fit for your situation that well. And you've got to be very critical, I guess, in your thinking about, is it worth it for you? You know, and we're all dentists, you know, we love a gadget. Oftentimes we have a bit of money. And so we have to look at our cost versus benefit. This can often be clouded by emotion and our love of gadgets. So if it's a bit monotonous at work and you're a bit over it and you've done your 14th scale and clean for the day, you know, dreaming about a new CEREC or something like that is something just for a bit of a change, can be something you yearn for. But it may not be the wisest choice for you. You know, potentially getting a dog or something else might be a better investment to improve your happiness. So when you think about your workflow, I sort of would advocate, I guess, for a hybrid solution, blending traditional techniques with digital technology. Okay, and this is going to be different for every person. It may be different for every patient that you see. But I guess a hybrid solution allows you to adapt and change and sort of, rather than having one workflow, you can basically change between them as you need. So I guess stay nimble, stay flexible in the way you design your workflow would be the way to go. So you have to look at it based on efficiency, accuracy, and cost. You know, you can have a very efficient, very accurate technique, but if it's $1,000 restoration, it's probably not worth doing. It may be worth doing, it depends on what practice you're in. So yeah, it's a matter of really thinking about the overall end-to-end solution. So think of your workflow as modular. Okay, if you do that, you can add bits on, subtract them, change them, have multiple bits, I guess, at each step that will allow you to adapt as well as you can. And remember, too steep a learning curve and you may not overcome it. So sometimes you'll have someone who's, you know, never had anything digital in their practice. They're looking at, you know, upgrading, maybe selling in a few years. They say, I've got to upgrade the practice. They jump in really in the deep end with all the computers and tech and everything, and it just is too much. You know, if you're struggling with your email, maybe buying a scanner and a mill and design software might be a little bit too much for you. You know, and then, you know, this shiny new thing you thought would change your life, it really has, but for the worse. So just being a bit judicious in the way that you decide to, I guess, design your workflow. So in thinking about that, we've really got to think, how does your restoration get from basically from the patient's mouth to the finished product? And in that, you know, we do have to look at the costs at each step, but we really have to look at, I like to think of it as look at the potential, the number of steps and the potential errors at each step that we have. Okay, so when we're looking at accuracy, you know, errors add up, and that's what we need to look at. So overall, I'd look at my digital workflow like this. Okay, I'd break it up into 4 main parts. So diagnosis and assessment, acquisition of data, design, and manufacture. So some systems will sort of go from start to finish with all these steps. Others will just play in one area. So under diagnosis and assessment, I would put photography, digital radiography, intraoral scanning, things like the T-scan. And also now we're looking at, I'm using the iTero 5D, I'll show that in a second, but caries detection digital caries detection as part of the initial workup. Acquisition is actually when we've done a prep or we're looking to do a restoration. How do we acquire the data from the patient? Is it a benchtop scanner, intraoral scanner, or a cone beam CT, or other methods that way? Once we've got that data, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to design with a digital CAD software, 3Shape, ExoCAD, Dental Wings, any of those? Sometimes we'll take that, take an analog model, wax it up, and then copy mill and scan it in later. So I've done that design analog, and then we're transferring to digital for manufacture. And then with manufacture, we're looking at how we're going to make it. There's three main ones there. That's milling, printing, and stereolithography. So we're going to cover off all these little areas over the next little bit, and we'll go from there. So step one, digital acquisition, diagnosis, and planning. So there's lots to this in digital photography and radiography and all that. We're not really going to cover off on. It's just such a big area. But we're pretty aware. I'm just going to touch on this quickly, but for a while now, we've looked at surgical planning, which is where we'll take some data from a cone beam CT and an intraoral scanner, in this case an iTero, and then we'll stitch them together. This will allow us to then, I guess, virtually place our implant where we want to. Make sure that we're not hitting vital structures. In this case, we're going to do a little sinus bump as we place it. What we're looking here is a guided surgery. So we're doing a lot of the work, I guess, off the field before we get to the patient. So we're doing a lot of our planning and everything without the patient in the chair. And that's what the digital allows us to do. From there now we can, where guides used to cost $1,000, $2,000 to get done, we can now print these in our own office quite predictably. And I guess the beauty of a surgical guide is that, especially if you're first starting out, is it's just one or two less things to think about, as you're trying to do a surgery. So it really takes that load off our brain during a stressful period. So these guides are quite easy. We can design them. We can just then export them as an STL, print them out. This one's obviously a fairly old one. And then place our sleeves and then go to the mouth and be ready for our implant surgery. So I guess this is still in our planning and diagnosis stages. That's part of the digital workflow there. Most of us will be fairly aware of, I guess, digital smile design these days. A lot of us have been doing it for quite a while. Dr. Coachman's been excellent, I think, massive contributor to dentistry in bringing this to the fore and changing the technology and the techniques that we've always used, just made it into a much more attractive and easy to use package. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. This is another software. This is quite an old slide, but basically with a digital smile design, it's essentially a 2D mock-up. And a large part of it is to help the patient sort of understand what we're thinking. It does help us sort of plan. Okay. And so it's a great tool to sort of, I guess, help us treatment plan and diagnose the patient that way. We've gone ahead, we've used this for quite a while in our practice. This is using 3Shape software. In this case here, this was an ortho patient. The orthodontist moved the teeth around, created some space for veneers. And so we sort of set everything up with Invisalign first. And then we're going ahead and we're designing our restorations. In this case, we had some gingival work done at the appointment as we scanned. So we'd done just some gingivectomies. We'd probed, found the CJs and done all that, like Dr. Robbins would teach you. And basically worked out there was a little bit extra gum there. So we decided to profile that first, do the iTero scans, then go back and do our wax ups. So what we've sort of brought in our practice, this is a fairly old case now, but essentially we'll take the intraoral scans, we'll then place that in a virtual articulator and then use our smile design over the top to sort of see how that fits. So we've been sort of doing a functional sort of smile design style setup for quite a while now. So from there we can export that case, export that wax up, that mock up. So this now is an aesthetic mock up and a functional mock up. This will take us about a week to spin around, to turn around. We print the models out, we make some putty keys off that. And then from there, we're really ready to go back to the patient. Obviously, we've had a couple of weeks now to let the gums settle down, and we're ready to do our mock-up, now try-in. So that's kind of our workflow there now for, I guess, as a diagnostic wax up. We're doing that really virtually now. So we're capturing that information a lot earlier in the workflow digitally, and then working that through from there. So the patient now sort of understands that, I guess, what they're going to get. They're seeing it before we've decided on our final treatment plan. At this point, we may not have decided how we're going to achieve the final result. We may be doing, are we going to do crowns, veneers? Is it going to be in composite resin or composite? And so at this point here, we're basically still in a diagnostic phase. The patient can now approve this mock-up and move forward from there and decide our final treatment plan. So I guess this is one of the concepts we discussed at the IG 3 years ago when we did this lecture. I was talking about the digital patient, and I think it's something we need to sort of look at. So we're incorporating a lot of digital a lot earlier in the workflow now. And so sort of a case like this where we're now using the intraoral scanner sort of almost first appointment, and then capturing all our data, and then we can combine all that data quite easily, and then do a much more thorough workup with the patient, and it allows our diagnosis and treatment planning to be a lot more thorough. So for me, I use the new iTero 5D. I don't know if this is available in North America yet. We've had it for 18 months or so now, but it allows some interesting features, which is this NIRI technology, which we can basically, it's a near infrared scan. So we can actually go and actually see in through the enamel. So it works a lot like a Cavo Diagnodent or something like that. So it's reflected light. But we can now, on our first visit or at our records appointment, we can now take an intraoral scan and actually then have a look. Not only does it take the scan, but it also takes intraoral photography, and also overlays that with this infrared technology, which can allow us to identify caries, also just see the amount of enamel, etc. So we're capturing a lot more information a lot earlier on, and then using that to build the picture with the patient. And we'll combine that with our digital photography, with X-rays, with cone beam CTs, and build that digital patient. And then we can sit down and really work out and really comprehensively plan the case. So I've got a small video here which we'll play. I'll skip forward.
Okay, so with Ben, we've taken a pre-op scan before. We're just going to do another one today. You've got everything from Invisalign to, you know, if you want to take impressions for crown and bridge, retainers, chairside milling, restorative, everything. I'm going to choose iRecord here. You can also do iCast. So there's different options. So we're going to pick iRecord, which basically lets me scan and then send it to the cloud and then use it however I want to.
Okay.
I can choose here as a multi-bite. So I'm going to choose an MIP bite and an open bite at vertical and centric relations. So we've got two different bites we can put into the...
Okay, we'll skip through a few of these.
So we're going to do our first scan here. We're going to start with the lower arch. So we basically just have it so that the wand is touching the tooth. We're going to run around and do the occlusal.
So this is really our records.
One of the advantages here is we can now do with the 5Ds pick up the decaying caries as well.
So with this scanner on the bottom left, you can see we're seeing that NIRI image as well.
So when we're doing into proximals here, we just sort of make a rocking motion forward and back just to pick up the embrasures, so it's nice and accurate. So with this, we can pick up from anywhere, it'll stitch it in. Okay, so I usually do the occlusal, then the lingual, then we go around and do the buccal.
through a little bit there. Most of us have seen an intraoral scanner. So,
bring your jaw over to this side for me.
one of the things with the
Arteros
and some of the other scanners for a large head, a lot of people will buy their scanners based on the
pushing back
I guess
there.
the size of the scan tip. And I guess one of the reasons why Arteros and some of the other scanners, the Prime scan, have larger heads is basically it's a wider image that you're capturing, a larger image. And so there's actually less scans.
That's the trickiest spot
You need
back
to
there.
take, and there's less stitching. The stitching's where the errors come in.
Anywhere where there's sharp edges, I'll.
So what we'll do here is just skipping through to just doing our first bite. Now the good thing about the Arteros
So with this, I'm just going forward and back, up and down, just like brushing teeth. And we're going to pick up our MIP bite. With the Artero, we can then do a second bite. Okay, so in a case like this, I'm going to open up the leaf gauge. So one of the big tricks here when we're opening vertical dimension is to then at this stage use the leaf gauge for squeezing together for me, sliding onto your back teeth. I'll try to touch at the back. Okay, squeeze together. All right, so now I've got my second bite, which I'm going to capture with my scanner. So I'm making sure it's on bite number 2. I can then just holding nice and steady, again, just brushing forward and back like brushing teeth. Now the big trick here is sometimes the patients stick their tongue out, which we don't want. So Ben's been good. So from here, we've now captured our second bite. Okay. We're now ready to go and just process those images. The scanner will clean this up in the computer here and then give us an image that we can check.
So we've now captured our data.
This is the Itero 5D. And with this, we can actually go through now and see what the enamel is doing within the tooth. So it's quite interesting that we can actually come in now and see what is left of the enamel. We can come around and look at interproximal caries. Okay, we can pick all that up on our scanner now. Now Ben, we've done some caries control on Ben, so we've got rid of some of the interproximal, a lot of the decay. But as we can see here, we can still pick up interproximally where we have some interproximal caries. The other advantage to this system is now we can actually see how thick the enamel is on the tooth. So when we start prepping, we know how much thickness of enamel we have. So for me, that's really a big advantage, to be able to come in and see what the condition of the enamel is before we start prepping. So we can also go back, we can look at what we've done as far as our vertical dimension. We can check our occlusal clearances. Now we can see here, we did open Ben up, but we've still got pretty close occlusal contacts in the posterior. If you want to look at it more like a stone model, like we traditionally would, we can do that as well. So it's a really good tool for analysing the teeth, the arches, and also how much clearance we have. So when I'm looking at this, I'd say we've lost a fair bit of tooth structure here. If we can kind of imagine where our molars would be, I think we're basically on the right track as far as restoring them. So from there, we can send that off.
Okay, so that's basically just a quick overview of the workflow we do for a diagnostic workup. Obviously, we combine it with these photos here. We can see Ben's had some issues with substance abuse, being Coca-Cola. He works outside a lot, drinks a lot of soft drink, a bit of reflux. So he's done a lot of damage to his teeth. And so we need to restore. So I guess when we're sort of designing our digital patient, we need to get as much of this information as fast as we can, early on as we can. That's really what this is all about. So from there, we can export that data into the software. Now, what you can see here is we've actually captured it with 2 different bytes. We've got an MIP byte, plus we've got an opened vertical dimension, or our proposed vertical, which is kind of arbitrary. We do it in the mouth with the leaf gauge, but it now allows us this is a centric relation bite. It allows us now to digitally wax up to hopefully our final proposed solution, early on. So we mount this up virtually in the articulator. We'll cover that a little bit later. And then we go ahead and do a wax up. Now in this case here, the teeth look a bit short, so we know there's going to be probably a gingival component that we have to look at. Okay. But again, we're doing our smile design and virtual wax up and basically checking the occlusion all at the same time. I think this case now is about 4 years old, so we've got a better computer now, so it works a bit better with the graphics. But from there, we can basically take our wax up, print it out. We can see here sort of before and after of what we've added. With these wax ups, I'm not too worried about a lot of anatomy at this point. I'm more looking at broad strokes as far as incised ledge position and vertical dimension. So I'm not too worried about how good the anatomy is at this stage, but we are looking at fairly flat plane occlusion just to establish that vertical dimension. Once we've done once we've printed that out, we can then make some putty stents, and then we're allowed to take that back to the mouth and do our basic mock-up. So this is probably our third visit with a patient. So we're getting to this point fairly early on. So we've done obviously our initial consult, have a chat, get to know the patient, have a coffee with them, see what they want. Then we've done our records appointment, and this is now basically our treatment planning session. But at this point, we've kind of got a final proposed solution. It really hasn't cost us too much. It cost us a bit of a wax up, cost a bit of time and diagnosing, but we're pretty much getting to our end point, or basically our mock up very early on in the piece. So we can try this in, we can check the bite, we can see how the occlusion is, go ahead from this point. And I'm pretty happy then that, what we've designed in the computer is actually now representative of what we've got in the mouth. There shouldn't be any real nasty surprises then as far as moving forward. So the patient can have a look, can decide. This is what I call a phantom of the opera shot. You've got basically, on the left-hand side of the screen is pre-op and then the mock-up on the right. So you can kind of see where we've added a little bit. As I said before, in this case, the teeth still look a little bit shorter and squarer. We know the incised ledge is correct, so there's probably going to be some gingival work going on here. So yeah, but the patient at this point is quite happy with that smile. We've checked the bite, we've checked aesthetics, phonetics, and we're ready to proceed. Then it's a matter at this point of deciding, right, how are we going to do this? Is this going to be in composite? Is it going to be in crown and bridge? How are we going to achieve it? That's the next thing that brings budget and that sort of stuff into it. So but building him up digitally first, it kind of allows full diagnosis of the case. So in this case, we knew there was some gum work needed, so we probed it, checked what the CEJ was, did some gingivectomies. I always like to do the posterior teeth first. So what I'll do is actually etch and bond the bisacryl, like your Pro Temp. I actually bond that in prior to starting on my preps. So the anterior teeth, we've got the bisacryl bonded on, and then I'll go ahead. We've built him up basically at our final restoration at the proposed height. We've bonded that in, and now I can just pick and choose which teeth I prep. I'll tend to do the posteriors first. Okay, we're using our Artero models here. Just some basic Emaxes, which my brother James has just added a little bit of nice aesthetic porcelain on the buckle. The rest of it's basically milled. And this is our posterior restorations in place. So I like to establish my vertical dimension posterior occlusion first. It also gives time for those anterior teeth, for those gums to settle down, and also let him just check that the aesthetics are good. And then I'll do the anterior teeth second. The other thing is if you do the front teeth first, usually they don't come back for the back teeth. So that's it. We prep our anteriors, scan that. We do use our Artero models. We mount them up like we normally would. So I do take a face bow and mount them up on our standard articulator to work with. So you can see that here. James has done these. These are basically initial milled restorations, which he's then going to add aesthetic porcelain onto. And there's our final case there. So that's basically, I think we've skipped a few things there, but I guess the theory is designing, like building a digital patient earlier on. So using your scanner, not just for capturing crown preps, but to also capture your diagnostic information and do a much more thorough workup earlier on in the piece. So that's something an extra, I guess, bow to the, or an extra skill, I guess, your intraoral scanner can have. The next step in the journey, I think, as far as our workflow, is pick your prosthetic path. How are you going to restore? How are you going to make the restorations? Again, so you've got to think of your workflow. How does your restoration get from the mouth to the finished product? And what are the steps and errors? And you also need to see, like, how much do I want to do? How much do you want to be involved? Some dentists want to be really involved with the design. They really want to be involved with the whole process. Others don't. They just want to basically send something away, get it back. They're not worried about it. But I think with digital, I think most of us these days would have used zirconia and Emacs, etc., which really, if you think about it, they're digital materials. I mean, there's obviously pressed Emacs, but most of the zirconia is a digital-only material. So CAD-CAM there has really allowed us to, I guess, explore and change the way we restore teeth. It does allow us to reduce a lot of the costs, and a lot of that comes, yes, from the materials. We're not using much gold anymore, but also from the labour. We're basically cutting out a hell of a lot by milling things. There's not as much casting and models and verifying and things. So, but you know, we can look at CAD-CAM as far as surgical guides. There's different materials: resins, glass, ceramics, zirconia. Tie-based restorations are a digital discipline, I guess you'd say. Custom milled abutments, off-axis screw channels, bars, bridges, hybrids, dentures. There's so much coming on from the digital workflow that's replacing the analog. So really you need to see, like, how much do you want to be involved with that, and how much do your lab want to be involved with that. So in making that decision, we need to look, I guess this is going back to, is casting still accurate? And you look at the traditional workflow, areas of potential error. And I guess we're pretty lucky that we actually got anything to fit for so long. You know, there's literally dozens, if not hundreds, of areas of potential error in our traditional workflow. You know, even just from your impressions. So did your assistant put too much adhesive in? Did they put no adhesive in? You know, was it the wrong material? Did it drag? Did the patient bite and move? You know, you then sent it through the courier. You know, in Australia here in middle of summer, 120 degrees, whatever, you know, it sat in the back of a truck with 5 things stacked on top of it. You know, then it gets to the lab, and the new guy at the lab's the second day in the office. He's the one pouring up your implant restoration. Was there an error there? You know, gypsum, did it expand? Was it a hot day, cold day? Like, there's so many little things that we see throughout the old analog process, which is potential for error. It really was a bit of a hit and miss a lot of the time with how good our accuracy was. You know, and the guys that did well were the guys that just had their systems worked out and they controlled it well. But there really is so many steps in the analog process where things can go wrong. And I think the big thing for digital is that it reduces that number of steps, if nothing else. So, you know, we see a case like this, we did a nice prep, did our lab work, did a nice dyes, trimmed them all up. In this case, I made a resin dye. We cut the margin back, we re-waxed that, looked super accurate, invested it, placed it on the die, fit absolutely perfectly. I was really happy with it, looked pretty. Get to the mouth, didn't fit. And we sit there and go, well, which step went wrong? Well, we just don't know a lot of the time where it went wrong. So we blame the lab tech and kind of move on. But, you know, it could be any one of those areas that we messed it up. And so we just don't know. So I guess digital technology and techniques have allowed the dentist more control in this design phase as well. And I guess we're doing more tasks ourselves when it comes to digital because it's a little bit easier. And that more control hopefully will result in better results for the patient. So with the digital versus analog, the digital tech has allowed the skipping of many of those labor intensive and oftentimes dirty steps. That's really what we've seen in our lab is we've outsourced so much of the production side of it, which traditionally was quite messy. and it's allowed us to simplify our workflow. It reduces the complexity and steps in the process. I think we've found that our techs now have become less of a traditional technician, handling basically being a tradesperson, and they're really becoming designers and finishers, because a lot of those steps are being outsourced. Nowadays we can outsource design. I know one of our labs in Sydney, they've teamed up with a Chinese lab, and basically, they scan it, they send it, the design gets done over there, it comes back and they mill it here. So that outsourced the design as well. But what that does, it reduces a lot of the labour requirement for the menial tasks. Okay. I think the lab technician potentially will evolve into being a much more highly skilled member of our team. But potentially those techs will want more money as they get to be able to do more and be a digital technician. So the techs nowadays need to be really digital savvy, and that's probably a big transition there, is that a lot of the techs weren't very much plaster monkeys, or so they're having to then adapt their skills entirely to go digital. And that's the same as some of the dentists as well. So this is my sort of lineup. I've got a digital benchtop scanner, a 3Shape. I've had iTeros now for 7 years. Got the latest, the 5D as well. We helped with that one in sort of bringing it out. So it was good to be a consultant on that. But as far as the digital workflow, I want to look at the data acquisition here. And really we're looking at two main categories. One's intraoral scanning and one's extraoral scanning or benchtop scanning. I think with intraoral scanning, that's sort of what the dentists are more interested in, because it avoids impressions. It's probably something different that you're doing day to day. So in that case, the area of potential error, really, we're taking a scan in the patient's mouth. There's no impressions, there's none of that. So we're eliminating a lot of those complex steps and errors there. And then the next step for error is really, because everything, the design phase should all be digital. There shouldn't be many chances to stuff it up. There's always a chance to stuff it up. But, from there, really the next step for error, the potential for error, is when we're actually manufacturing. So when we're milling. And that can be the prosthetic and the model. We'll talk about the model in a second. So the interesting thing about intraoral scanning is we're starting to see better, data going into the process of manufacture and design. The ability of a dentist now to, when he does the scan, he sees it on the screen in front of him or her, is to identify problems in real time and then correct it then and there. Oftentimes the traditional impression, no matter how good you are, when you pour it up, you then, 2 days later or a day later, you find the errors. At that point, the patient's home, it's too hard to call them back, and you have to just deal with that error throughout the process. With digital, you can go back, you see the error straight away, you just delete that on the scan, you go back, you rescan it, you fix it. One of the big labs here, quite a few years ago, they decided they'd get some of their big volume users and actually help them out. They were at about a 15 or 16% remake rate on their crown and bridge, and some of these big volume, big practices. And a lot of it was just basically some poor impressions coming through. So they teamed up with the dental practices and said, look, we'll basically help you out with the scanner. You send all your lab work to us, and basically we'll team up that way and just scan everything instead. So they went from a 16% remake rate to a 0.5%. Just from basically using an intraoral scanner, eliminated all those impression problems. Okay, and so for them, that was actually quite a profitable thing, and it helped them out a lot. So, oftentimes, yes, we do blame the lab techs all the time anyway, but oftentimes the impressions are probably, that case was doomed from the start. So intraoral scanning allows a better quality of information sort of going into that workflow. So it's quite an important factor. The second, way of doing it is extraoral benchtop scanning. This is, you still have to take traditional impressions or make traditional impressions, as we were taught. So from there, we make our impression, we send it to the lab. we pour the models. So there's still potentials for error there in the model work and pouring up and impressions, shrinkage, warpage, etc. But once we then scan it, then we've eliminated all the other stuff. And then the next potential for error will be the milling and manufacture again. So if your impressions are pretty good, and this is like most people, we've still got a little bit of analog at the start, and then we're going digital after that. I'll talk about the two different workflows in a second, but I think that's the main difference is, X-ray on benchtop, we've still got some of our confounding factors are still there with the impressions, but once we've done that, we can then pour it up and move on. So you'd sort of think, okay, we'll do intraoral scanning for everything. The problem is it's not there yet as far as some of the indications. So we'll talk about the intraoral scanning pathway. So the intraoral scanners, we're looking at the iTero, the CEREC, Trios, Nevo, 3M TrueDef, all those, which basically removes the impression and lab steps. Okay. This means we're very heavily reliant on digital modeling. Okay, this printed or milling. There's different technologies, sort of an old one. No one's using powder free. No one's using powder much anymore. Pretty much most of the scanners these days are accurate. They're good enough to be equivalent to a traditional PVS impression. Some are better than others. And some will be accurate to one tooth or two teeth. Some will be accurate to sort of more of a full arch scenario. So you need to know your tool. You need to know what technology they're using as far as how accurate it is, over a larger area and for larger indications. So we kind of saw the intraoral scanning before. This is how a prosthodontist takes a selfie. So it's quite quick and easy these days. I'd say it's probably, by the time you look at mixing impression materials and setting, it's probably equivalent on time as far as when you scan versus a traditional impression. And accuracy wise, they're pretty much line ball. So when we're looking at intraoral scanning, we can do implant scans as well. In this case, we just substitute out our traditional impression copings for scan bodies or scan flags, which basically just have a flat surface that the computer can stitch up later and know where the implant is underneath the gum. Allows us to basically virtually build our restorations from there. This is an old still shot iTero, still very, very accurate, probably as accurate, if not more accurate than a lot of the video scanners. So the old school technology still works very well. So from there, we can take our intraoral scan. We immediately get a rendering of what we've captured. We can check everything. If there's an error or we haven't got enough clearance in our occlusion, we can adjust it at this point and then rescan. So again, we're checking our data before it goes into the system. That gets imported then into our design software, and from there we can go ahead and design and mill our restorations. So I guess the big thing about intraoral scanning is the models. I guess when you take a scan, most dentists will buy a scanner and then they'll, it's all good. They take the scan, they send it to the lab. Then the lab has to somehow work out a way to work with that data. Without a physical model, it makes it very difficult to actually do anything more than really a monolithic restoration. So if you're looking at, checking occlusion or checking contact points or stacking any sort of feldspathic porcelain, you need a model to work on. So really that's our problem. So suddenly you've avoided the impression step, but then you've got to make a model anyway. And then, so the printed models, which most people rely on, they are improving, but the printers have sort of hit a bit of a wall as far as accuracy. They're still looking at that 35 to 50 micron accuracy, and they haven't got much better in the last 5 years. And so there is a bit of a limitation there with how accurate they are, and precision as well. So this, I'd say, the models at this stage of the glitch in the digital workflow, especially when it comes to implants, because sometimes we've got to then print a plastic model and then we've got to get a metal analog into the model. Now that's fine, but then you have to verify that's accurately being placed. And so if you're going to verify it, then you've got to take your traditional impression anyway to then verify your digital model to work off. And so you're sort of double handling and it doesn't become that efficient. So for mine, I think, especially for implants, I'm still using a traditional PVS impression, making the implant model and then scanning that. But for crown and bridge, I'll still use the intraoral scan and the iTero workflow. So the difference with, I guess, the iTero to the other systems is that it does milled models. They've got the patent on milled models, so they're milling them instead of printing them. And for mine, they've been a lot more, they're very accurate. Basically, a milled restoration versus a milled model, it just tends to fit more. The mills are probably good to 5 or 6 microns, whereas printing sort of your 30 to 35. This case now has been in the mouth for 8 years. So we were playing around with printed implant models a long time ago. I think this is 2012 or 13. But again, we still had to make our traditional models and then verify, our printed models. And this was sort of fairly experimental at the time, but it became a lot of double handling. Yeah, the restoration fit, but sometimes you got to say your restoration might be accurate the way it's milled, but then your model's inaccurate. And I think that's a lot of the time where we get problems with a lot of our workflows. The crown might come back and fit. It used to be, okay, was the casting wrong? Now it's okay, was the model wrong? And your lab tech's fitted down to a model that's inaccurate. This was a case I saw on one of the Facebook pages. One of the lab techs have, just bought a printer and he was trying to work out this case. He'd done all the workflow. When he's gone and done the printing, those dies don't fit down very well. Okay, how are you going to adjust that? Because you don't know where to adjust. The problem with the resins as well is they continue to shrink over time. Like they continue to polymerize based on temperature and heat and light and everything. So they're not a stable resin a lot of the time. So there are some issues with the printers. And at this stage, I think that's probably our main glitch in the digital workflow, is just be a bit wary of it. If you're printing a solid model working off that, that may be the way to go. But then again, if you're doing a single unit, I think you're going to be okay. Starting to work with multiple units, that can be a bit of an issue. So more units, we're sort of amplifying the problems. So I use the iTero. They've got a milled solution. Again, they've got the patent on it, so that's why no one else has really gone down that route. But this way here, it's a very nice system. It fits very well. They've been doing them for 10 years now, and still really, if in the industry, no one's come close to these models. We can cut them back and do soft tissue masks and all that. So that's basically what makes my digital workflow for crown and bridge work, is these models. So I've seen a lot of heartache from people that have bought scanners and then tried to use printed models. And if you speak to the lab, some of them was like, yeah, after 5 years, we've finally nailed our models. It's like you've had 5 years of crowns not fitting properly. So it is a bit of a worry. And I think, I'm not sure if there's a basic inherent limitation to how good printing can be. But I think it's just something I keep an eye on. Look, as soon as the printers get better, I'll skip this and I'll go to them. But at this point, I think we're still limited by this massive big flaw in our workflow. So for some people, oftentimes just do a traditional impression and you can basically then do the other workflow. I think it's something to think about as far as when you're investing in your technology. How do you avoid the model issues? You don't use a model. And this has really been the way CEREC has worked for a long time. So CEREC, you don't have models, you don't have to send it to the lab. It's basically same day turnaround. The patients like it. Great for simple cases, lower cost per unit once you've paid the machine off. But potentially there's a reduced accuracy over lab fabricated work. Generally, it's a monolithic restoration with a bit of staining. It's not really for layered ceramics. You may as well then, take an impression and send it to the lab if you're going to do that. So it's very good for simple work. It works very well for the people that are masters at it. And I did a lot of CEREC during residency, and I think it's a great tool, but it does have its limitations. The problem with the mills is that they're not as accurate, and if any benchtop mill will not be as accurate as a big industrial mill. They're designed for speed. I think some of these the new prime mills, like some of the restorations are 5 minutes they can mill, but you may be missing out on some accuracy there. So it is a good tool. It has its limitations. You got to learn to make it sing like any tool in dentistry. So it's about the operator more so than the equipment. But yeah, that's how would you have, as far as that digital workflow end to end, it avoids the glitches of the models. This is a survey I did in Australia, and I think at a meeting I attended, 53 people, 37 were using CEREC. We have some limited options as far as labs in Australia, so a lot of dentists have gone down the CEREC route. 52% send out to a dental lab, but also 60% of them said they'd employ a lab technician out of those CEREC guys as well. So a lot of them are driven towards the CERECs and that style from the lack of options for lab. But then once they've got it, they also say, geez, I'd like someone else to be doing this. Okay. This is a quick case study. I'll flick through it. This is all intraoral scanning. So when we look at this gentleman came to us. He was a lawyer, been to a cosmetic dentist down the road who did the front 2 crowns. He wasn't really happy with the result. He obviously had some other issues going on here. He likes his wine. He likes a lot of fruit juices, and he'd done a lot of reflux and sort of done a lot of damage to his mouth. So again, early on, we went on, did the diagnostic wax up, same workflow as we usually do, find the incisal edge position, try our mock-up in, get the sign off, go ahead. So for me, with my full mouth preps, we'll take our scan, generally mounted models in centric relation at proposed vertical, using a leaf gauge. So we'll open them up to our proposed vertical, go from there. We do our virtual wax up, try it in, the patient consents to proceed. At that point there, I actually go and bond my trial restorations in. So I isolate the patient with cotton roll, I etch, I basically remove any old restorations that need removing, temporize them, I'll roughen all the teeth up, air abrade if I need to, etch, bond, and then basically just use my putty matrices with bisacryl and just basically place them into the mouth, let it set, it bonds just as nicely as composite resin, and then I can trim up around the embrasures and around the gingiva, and then I can let the patient go away really for a couple of weeks usually and just let them try it in. So they actually go away, they eat, they speak, they chew, they do all that sort of stuff. And then if anything's broken at that point, we know there was a problem. If not, we can go away and start doing our restorations. And again, I'll do a segmental restoration. So posteriors first, then anteriors second. The reason I like doing that, once you prep a full arch, you've really cut away all your reference points. That becomes a bit of a pain. And, doing 12, 14, 18 preps, 16 preps is, it can be a lot of big mornings. So I'd rather break it up into little bite-sized chunks and do it that way. Establish my posterior vertical dimension first and then do the anterior second. So again, this is our workflow. You can see the bonded bisacryl restorations at the front. We start working our way through our posterior. These are just Emax milled restorations. Okay, so lab proposal. In this case, I've done some crown lengthening as well, just to gain just a bit of functional crown lengthening, to gain some more tooth to grab onto. So our milled restorations, again, quite a straightforward workflow, using the models just to basically check contacts, all the occlusion and functional stuff's been done virtually on the virtual articulator. And basically we go from there, cement and place or bond in the posterior restorations. We then come back, now we're ready to do the anteriors. We've got some resin buildups there. What you can see there on the number 8 is actually the original zirconia restoration still in place. That's the original incisal edge position. So the rest of it you can see is the buildup that we've done. Okay. I've just taken off that crown, the zirconia. That's the prep that I was left with underneath it. You can see the work we've done around the place to get the gums looking better. We prep the anteriors, lower veneers. We send that off. Again, this is all done intraoral scanner. So we send that off. We do an Emax milled coping essentially because James is going to stack the aesthetic porcelain afterwards. So what I want here is basically my occlusal contacts, sometimes interproximal contacts, and the margins to be milled. Okay, so we're not mucking around with that. Stacking marginal porcelain's a pain in the ass, takes most of the time. So we just want to have something that fits on there nicely, and we're just literally painting the outside with some aesthetic porcelain. So we're milling, the lower veneers will be milled out of wax or resin wax. So it's a casting resin. Okay, there's our models there. That's how it comes back from our milling center. So we just send it out to a milling center, they mill it, they send it back. It takes about 24 hours to turn this around. Okay, you can see the milled wax down the bottom there. That's how it comes back. So it's really raw. So it's quite cost effective because they literally do nothing more than take it off the machine, stick it in the box and send it to us. We do all the finishing and all that stuff at our side. We fit it down. Now the beauty of these is we can go back and actually cut back margins, add wax, change everything, no matter what we want to do. We've basically got a milled chassis, if you think of it that way, and then we go ahead and modify it as we need it. So we can add wax, take stuff away till we've got our final contours. James will polish them up, and then we go ahead and this is the case we've pressed these in Emax. He's stacked the porcelain on the upper teeth with the aesthetic porcelain, and we go from there. So in this case, we've started from here, done the posteriors first, then gone ahead and restored. So he was quite happy with the result from where he started with. Again, took a fair bit of work. The gums are still settling down from our surgeries that we did. But in the end, he was quite happy. Now, he did ask to have that diastema put back in afterwards. First, he didn't want it. We put it back in. He came back. This is actually a 4.5-year review. So that diastema opened up again. But, generally it's been quite a stable result for him. But yeah, this is, I think, 4.5-year follow-up now. So, but that was, again, an entirely intraoral scanner workflow. So we're going to go now and look at the lab scanner pathway. So we'll take an impression first. So this is what your labs will be doing most of the time. So they'll have a benchtop scanner, 3-shaped lava Ineos Procera. These systems are probably the most versatile. So you can do crowns, bridges, abutments, frameworks, bars, etc. You still need to make your impression. You still need to send it off and get a model made. Some will scan the impression, but still it's a very accurate way to go. The indications for this are a lot broader. And so for implant work, in a case like this, we're going to take our impression, we're going to capture once we've had a prototype restoration in place, do a custom impression coping, go ahead, make our impression. We've then got a lab model or an implant model with a soft tissue mask that shows our emergence profile. We then can scan that, digitize it, and then we're designing our abutments. We're actually copying basically emergence profile, matching our restoration to the soft tissue rather than, our soft tissue having to conform to what our lab makes for us. So in this case, we've done a full contour restoration, cut it back virtually so we can stack the porcelain on the outside. We've done a little landing pad out of zirconia on the palatal, which also surrounds our screw channel so there's less chipping. And then we go ahead and mill that. The extraoral benchtop workflow allows a lot more, complex designs. When we start looking at intraoral scanner, once we start going around a corner or going more than 2 or 3 units, there's just inherently built in some inaccuracies as we take all this data. There's millions of points of data every second are captured with an intraoral scanner. As they try to stitch it together, they average everything out, and that can result in inaccuracies. So for traditional crown and bridge on natural teeth, that slot will be taken up oftentimes with a periodontal ligament. With implants, we have to be more precise. So for restoration such as this, I'm still going for a traditional PVS impression and then going ahead and verifying it, and then lab scanner and go from there. So for full arches, again, I'm still looking at traditional impression, this case here, this is the way I do it. It's my little workflow. It saves an appointment. I'll do, in the top left, do my traditional splintered impression, pick that up. Then I'll take some non-engaging abutments, as you can see in the bottom left. I'll basically put that in there, tack it together, obviously sectional and join them all together. What I've done there, that's basically my set of rims, okay? And it's a verification jig kind of in one go. So I do that at the same appointment. So this is my second, I've done the impression, I take it out, I put these abutments in, I build up this essentially a rim. And then on the bottom right, you can see I'm then opening the patient up to the proposed vertical dimension with a leaf gauge and taking my bite that way. So I've now got a verification rim and a bite rim all in one go, so I can go straight to my final mounting and workflow from there. Saves an appointment for the patient. With that comes down to the design. So from there into the software, this is 3Shape design software. Pretty much designing, everyone's been through that, I'm pretty sure. You can then design these. Again, milling for this sort of restoration is much better than the old casting, soldering, and then having to put it all back together and finish it, and then, you know, potentially do some electrolysis to kind of get it fitting, spark erosion to get it working again. We've worked with these guys now for, down in Australia, there's a company named Ostion, does some really nice bars with us. This is about 5 years old, this case, 5.5 years old. So what we do here, we've actually got milled titanium bar. I keep my bars quite thin, like narrow, so that's easy for hygiene. It's convex underneath, so they can basically clean it with a toothbrush. We actually mill our hater clips into the bar, and then they actually mill on the superstructure, they mill the housings in as well. We can do this with locators, and it saves a lot of restorative space that we actually, so it might save us 2 or 3 millimeters of restorative space doing these restorations. So it's quite a nice way to go. This was, I think, about a 4-year follow-up for this guy. So again, I always put in more retention than what I need in case there's a bit of redundancy there. He basically went through, I think in 5 years, we've changed 4 hater clips. So maintenance-wise, it's pretty good for us. That's the soft tissue at 4 or 5 years. Again, the bar's quite thin. My theory as well is that it'll actually flex. Titanium's quite flexy, so it will flex with the mandible if it has to. But basically, he can clean that just with a Sonicare toothbrush. He doesn't have to get under it too often. Again, it's a later follow-up. Go from there. Another solution we use, this sort of workflow, is sometimes we'll use the GPS or equator and put on the side. I call these saddlebags. Again, it's reducing the overall restorative space that we need for the patient. So we can do quite low profile bars this way. Still have them very retentive. This company, Ostion, we work with, they've also done some for full arch fixed cases. They've done some nice, they've got a nice product called a Nexus 2 bridge. This case here was about a 15 or 20-year-old anterior bridge case. The posterior teeth failed. So these are old Calcitech spline implants, which they don't make bits for anymore. So these guys are basically amazing engineers that we're working with. And so they can actually just custom design everything to fit to any platform. So we placed some new posterior implants in. The canine and premolar there just had to get removed. So we did that. I actually did that at the issue appointment. The interesting thing about these guys is they managed to do an off-axis screw channel here because of the positioning of the original implants that are 20 years old were basically not ideal for a bar. And so what these guys do, they do a titanium subframe, and then they do a monolithic milled superstructure which cements over the top. A lot of the times for full arch, the big problem is going to be if you're doing monolithic zirconia and you get a crack or a break, the maintenance on them is a nightmare and it costs a lot of money to fix things. So this is a very high-tech, low-cost solution relatively. So this is monolithic milled PMMA with just some resin staining around the gums. So this fits down quite nicely. You can see it's a knife edge finish on the facial. They've got angle correction on the screw channels, so it comes out in the correct position. And the whole superstructure just lutes on. So if there's a problem, okay, we're not redoing the titanium. The titanium stays there. We're just remilling and fixing up the superstructure. Again, we've got the angle correction. You can see those slots in the bar. That's where the angle correction is. We'll go from there. So in this case, what we did, we actually do 2 sets. The first set is in PMMA. You can see here, we tried it in. I didn't like the aesthetics very much, so I fixed that and corrected it in composite resin. I added to the incisal edges and just recontoured things till I was happy. We actually let him go for 3 or 4 months. When he was happy with it, nothing had broken. We actually came back. I just took the iTero scanner and I scanned what he had there. And the company, they'd already milled the second titanium frame, identical. Then all he had to do was just basically copy mill the restoration of the superstructure in zirconia. What they've done here, they've done facial cutaways for our veneering porcelain. And so then all we have to do, all the functional stuff, so our occlusion, everything is all in zirconia. It's nice and strong. It's been worked out in resin. So it's going to break in resin, it'll break in zirconia and vice versa. So all our functional stuff's been done in our trial. And then we've just copied that. James is then just going to stack the facial porcelain on top. I'm going to look at doing the pink gum, pink gingiva, pink porcelain. And then again, this whole restoration just cements on over the top. If there's a problem, we can unscrew it, put it in the furnace, take it out. If it's a big problem, they're just going to mill another superstructure for us. They give us a 10-year warranty on this stuff. So we're sort of, for cost-wise, we're guaranteed it's not going to cost us anything for 10 years. So it's a really nice restoration for us to use for our patients and quite cost-effective. So this is the way we've been doing our sort of full arches that way. But again, it's through our take an impression first and then scanning it in. The third step is looking at what are you going to make your restoration out of? So when it comes to production, it's a bit simpler. Really looking 3 different ways. So you're going to mill it, you're going to print it, or you're going to sinter it. Milling has probably got the widest range of options as far as materials, and more coming out every single day. So it's probably your decision as to what materials you want. I'd probably say give it a few years in the market before you start jumping into some of these new materials. There's all sorts of different ones coming out, flexible resins, hard things. It's just, yeah. A lot of them are designed to make it easier for the lab, but may not be the best long-term. So just be a bit wary of it. Milling is still the most accurate method of production. It's literally what you see is what you get. Wax and resin printing, it is getting better, as I said, but I think there's some limitations to it. It is great for some indications and not for others. It's very versatile. It creates extremely complex shapes that are not possible through any other method. So it's opened up interesting ways in which we can solve problems. And then there's laser sintering. This can be titanium, cobalt, chrome, with 3D printing metals. So we cover off on milling machines, in-office machines versus industrial or centralized machines. In-office machines, oftentimes they're very convenient, but high initial cost for what they are. Consumables may be very expensive because we're dealing usually with single ingots. We're not sort of dealing with a big puck. And the milling actually is not as good. But these two machines, as I said, most of them are designed for speed. They're designed for chairside rather than the accuracy. When you look at industrial mills, some of these big ones, the accuracy, the one we use, it's verified twice a month down to 3 microns. It's unbelievably accurate. Very expensive. You're looking at $1 million. These things like 10 tons. They're a big industrial mill. And the labs the labs that own them get there by, economies of scale. They're milling a puck. They might be taking 20, 30, 40 restorations out of one puck of material. And so it's an industrial process, which you'd never you couldn't afford it and you wouldn't manage it in a small lab or an office. So as I said, there's many mills out there. Again, there's different types, there's wet milling, dry milling. You really have to decide what you want for yourself. Once you're milling yourself, you still then have to finish them. You have to sinter, You have to stain, you have to do all this stuff. As a dentist, is that what you want to be doing, or do you want to be back in there prepping another tooth? So you really have to be deciding. As I said, you may, at your point in your career, you want to be doing a bit more lab tech stuff. You know, sit out the back, have a coffee while the furnace goes off, and, you know, check your Facebook, do whatever. It's horses for courses and what you want to be doing. I've had people that bought a scanner and then they weren't happy with the result with the lab, then they bought a printer, and then they're about to buy a mill. They're about to have to buy a zirconia furnace, ceramic furnace, buy a ceramic kit. There's an extra $100,000 in stuff there. And then I said, who's going to be doing this for you? And she went, oh, I'll get one of my assistants to do it. I was like, just send it to a lab. You know, take an impression, send it to a lab, save yourself $150,000. You know, we sort of go down this rabbit hole, and it's really, you got to look at cost versus benefit. You know, you're a lab technician or a dentist sometimes. So I went down the path of centralized milling. I don't own a mill. I own a printer, but not a mill. The big reason is I don't have to own and maintain expensive machinery. You know, anyone with mills knows they break down, they need maintenance. You need an engineer pretty much to keep them going properly. You know, they need tech skills to work out the software, and when things aren't talking to each other, and then they have to go down for maintenance and all this other stuff. You just don't have to deal with that when it's someone else's stuff. So cost per unit is much lower with centralized milling. As I said, our milling center, I think they've got 14 mills. They've got engineers running them. If one breaks down, they've got redundancy. So it's not affecting my turnaround time. And industrial units, again, are much more accurate. This is the mill that we use a lot of the time for our metal work. It's a big German one. Actually, the first time I went and saw it, there were actually 2 German guys inside it. I had to fly out and fix it. But I walked in and there's 2 guys standing inside the mill, and I was like, I didn't think it was as high tech as they said, but yeah. But yeah, for this sort of restoration, you know, they can bust these out very, very fast. It's a 24-hour turnaround for us. Once we've designed it, we hit send, they mill it, comes back, we sinter it, stain it, glaze it, fit it down, get the contacts, and it's ready to go in the mouth. So it's really not a big turnaround. The slowest bit of the production for us is those mill models, which have to come from Mexico or Las Vegas for us. So they have to be flown down to Australia. So that's our slowest point in the whole solution. So for us, custom titanium abutment's about $160. Emax is about $80. Now, with all these, from our milling center, we're getting 10 to 15-year warranties. So, you know, that's good. We know we don't have to pay for it if it stuffs up. Zirconia coping. So basically, it's a big cost saving for us, and having the lab in-house definitely saves us a bunch of money. And we still have full control with this. We're designing it, we're sending it off, they just mill it, we come back, we're finishing it. So we have all the control we want. We're just not doing a lot of the dirty work anymore. As I said, 3D printing, I think it's hit a bit of a plateau. You can print temps, casting resin splints, guides, dentures, etc. The big problem is there's not many intraoral materials yet. So you buy a printer, you print something out, but there's nothing that you can put in the mouth permanently as yet. So yes, it's exciting technology, but once you print something, you've then got to turn around and make it into something else. So then you're going back to casting again. Okay, so, you know, people are making splints, but, you know, they can be a bit brittle, they smell a bit. So is it the best material? Not yet. Now, I think it'll get there, but at the moment, what you're printing is essentially expensive temps, things like that. So we've got to be a bit careful there. The 3D printed stuff is still not there as far as permanent restoration. As I said, I think we'll get there. So yeah, there are exceptions to that, obviously, with everything, but at this stage, generally, it's not a permanent solution what you're printing out. We do have a little 3D printer we use for castings, so we'll 3D print the casting out. So we have a vacuum print casting machine practice. So do that, we can 3D print, adjust it, add wax where we need to, adjust it. It's not huge, and pretty much the same process with pressing email, casting ceramics. So we've got that option. that's our, again, May the 4th. So basically, 3D printing, it is exceptional. It's unbelievable technology, but it's probably not as mature as we like to think. It's cool and it's cheap and it's accessible to everyone, but is it a great long-term restoration? Not sure yet. This gentleman here, this is a dentist, so he knew what he was on about. This was not a very convoluted consent form. But he basically wanted his lower, he'd had his posterior teeth done in gold a long time ago. His front teeth were wearing down. And so we actually did these front restorations. These were 3D printed resin. And then basically we cast them in gold. So they're basically gold veneers just to protect his lower teeth. So these were all CAD CAM as well. And that was basically there just to, he was retired, he was married, he didn't worry about the looks. So, but we've been using 3D printed and then cast frameworks for our bars, superstructures, etc. for about 10 years now, 8 years now. They all work very well. Again, you just need to know your casting tech. Anyone can 3D print these out. It's what they do with the casting. Again, the errors get brought back in when we go back to the analog world. So you need to be a bit wary there. All right. And then the final one is it's good. It's probably accuracy and still not off the shakes the work. Great. Aesthetic there, if it's really there. Nothing but the bits of progress. So now that implants and everything which you can custom print now, which is very exciting technology. Because talking occlusion, I think we'll just finish up with that. We're doing all right, Tim? Good.
We're doing great.
We better split this in. So this is, of course, the pathologist handshake. But yeah, does occlusion still matter? And, I guess one of the things is, it's very good to be digital, but how do you do occlusion with digital? So we'll cover off on this a bit, but it's still very much the same. When you go to digital, you still have to use your analog thinking and the way you do things. It's just a slightly different tool. You still need accurate diagnosis and adjustment of occlusion to minimize the destructive forces. So you still have to understand your occlusion. You're just using a different tool to execute it. So in anything, be it teeth, periodontal implants, joints, etc., less force means less friction, means less wear. So especially with some of the restorations like implants or hybrids, remember you've got greatly reduced proprioception, increased bite force with implants, and no shock absorption or proprioception no shock absorption periodontal ligaments. So we need to actually then engineer things better. And that's really where the occlusion comes into it. We need to engineer the safety factors into our restorations. And that becomes very complex. It's very hard to do with something. Sometimes the digital restorations are a bit oversimplified. We may not be able to actually engineer it as well as we want. The other thing is we do have to look at our modern materials. They're not the same as what, we're talking CAD CAM. So some of these are zirconias and ceramics that are milled. Oftentimes they're a bit stronger. They're a bit than what our traditional materials were. A lot of our mythology stuff was sort of developed through metal or dentures even. These new materials, they don't like to be adjusted very much. They're very strong. They don't have much give. And so basically they can be a lot more difficult to adjust and smooth and make up for lately. So we need to actually make sure that through our process, we're working on our occlusion, working on our mechanics and taking that into account as we design our restorations. The ideal is you get to the mouth and you don't adjust anything. That's always, as a dentist or a restorative dentist, that's really our goal. We do the work off the ball so that when we get in the mouth, you don't have to do much at all. And so we need to look at that. So the knowledge of occlusion is vital for that, mainly in controlling your forces. Okay. And sometimes people say it actually makes it harder doing it digital, but actually I think it makes it a lot easier. The way we design our restorations, we used to have to do wax ups and make sure we had everything right and use the articulator. The machines will do, the technology of the software will do that a lot of the time now. One of the things I learned from Frank Spear was to basically build in wear facets. you know, especially with ceramics, you really don't want point-to-point contact in ceramics. So nowadays with our virtual articulation, we can go ahead and it'll actually then wear those facets in for you. And so, you know, it's much better for ceramics doing it that way. And you can also mill very accurately these days. So, you know, gone are the days. The problem is gold you could cast very easily and you could almost get what you wanted, then you have to spot it in. Ceramics, when we're doing it in stacked porcelain, there's so much shrinkage and everything. You're always grinding stuff in forever. With milled restorations, with monolithics, I think, you know, we're back to being quite accurate, and what we design is almost what we get. So I think we can be very accurate in our occlusion again. We just need to use our digital articulators to basically do the work in the software rather than in the mouth again. I guess it's about, we need to be able to replicate our mandibular motion. That's largely what occlusion is about. It's making sure, you know, whatever spare parts we're making, which is generally what we're doing with non-genuine spare parts, we're going to stick them in the mouth and hopefully they survive. We need to make sure that they're in harmony with our envelope of function. So, you know, one of the things we never really look at is, I guess, how the patient chews. You know, usually when we see a simple, you know, triple tray articulator or something, we're not actually replicating the patient's mandibular motion. You know, we don't chew straight up and down. It's not a simple static occlusion. You know, occlusion is a static thing. Articulation is the way teeth move and way teeth work with each other. And that's what we really need to take into account with that digital work. You know, we can sort of see, you know, teeth work as cutter blades, not as crunches. We see Lundin and Gibbs in their days, you know, teeth have to be very precise. These stone models, you know, they never wear down because the teeth don't touch. They just glide past each other very, very carefully. So we need to design our restorations with a similar level of precision that, you know, they're going to be there to work properly, but they're not going to break. They're not going to get in the way. So we need to take that into account when we're designing our restoration. So that means it has to be in sort of harmony with our mandibular motion, with the patient's movements. Okay, we've all sort of done this. We've all done our waxing courses and design and understand, hopefully, mandibular motion. So we need to basically adapt that into our digital workflow. Now, in analog, I guess, traditionally, adjustable articulator is really the only way to achieve balance and control in our restorations. Okay, without it, we generally will get unstable prosthetics, we'll get wear, we'll get breakages, things will chip, things will move. Patients call up Monday morning and scream at us, all from that. So we really need to be using that. Now, a lot of the time with digital articulators is that, a lot of the time with digital restorations, sometimes the guys developing the restorations aren't thinking like an orthologist or like a restorative dentist. They're lab technicians, and they basically just look at a static bite and they're pretty happy with that. We need to bring in the function back into it. I am a fan of articulators. This is something Dr. Broadwell stuck up there a while back, and it's haunted me ever since. So, but up to now, it's been pretty hard to, I guess, program and use an articulator in the virtual world. So how do you go between that real world and virtual world? So we can take our scans and we can set them, you know, quite arbitrarily. This is kind of like a Koisbo setup. That you just, basically everyone will be set on that standard plane like a Koisbo, and that will work very well for the majority of cases. There's some cases that probably, you know, it's where the prosthodontist kicks in and you start getting closer and closer to perfection. But you know, it's quite easy for us to just basically mount a case with a standard generic sort of mounting, as in a Koisbo. We can also then look at using our face bows. Now, it's very hard. A lot of people would sort of say you can't really mount a face bow. So we've been doing this for quite a while. This is basically a split cast system that's made for the Dana from 3Shape. So one of the interesting things here is we still take our traditional model and then we mount it up using our face bow, and then you scan it in. So I guess 3Shapes look this way as well. And notice their new scanners were designed to basically, you basically calibrate your scanner to your articulator. And I guess the thinking is, you know, you're still going to have to work on a model at some point. So mount the models first, get all this information as far as your face bow and and everything you want to do, then scan that, move that into the articulator, work on it, and then you can come back to the real world to do the final finishing. So I don't think we're done with articulators just yet, like real world articulators. So we can use this split cast system, then transfer that across to a scan plate, pop it into our 3Shape scanner, and then go ahead and import that. What this is doing here, this is capturing the angulation of the model and basically capturing our face-bow information from there. So our geometry is going to be more correct. In the newer scanners, as you can see here, there's a little jig in the center that allows you to mount, when you mount that stone, it calibrates your articulator into the software. So when you go to design your restoration, you literally just plonk the your mounted model into the scanner, you tell it which articulator you're using, and it does the rest for you. So they've sort of gone down that route of saying, okay, well, you're gonna have to work on a model later on. Let's mount the model first, scan that in, get the geometry right, and then work in between the virtual and real world as one. So with this split cast system, you can basically just scan that in. And you can see here the variation between what would be like a normal sort of coist setup, a flat plane setup, versus the face bow. There is a bit of variation there. So it allows probably just a bit more accuracy as far as our geometry goes with designing our restorations. From there, you can enter in all your traditional adjustments. And then go ahead, design your restoration. In this case, we're doing an implant crown. We can go through and basically eliminate any excursive interferences. So we're doing this in the software, not on the model or not in the patient's mouth. So what that allows us to do is then we could almost do this just as a monolithic restoration. Now, perhaps here we'd look at doing a monolithic zirconia, a custom abutment, and we pretty much know there's going to be minimal adjustment needed. Okay, and we basically avoided our excursive interferences and hopefully no excessive occlusal loads on our implant restoration, which hopefully would result in less bone loss, etc. And then go to the mouth. I like to do a screw-mounted or cemented-on retrievable restoration. So I try my abutment in first. As you can see, there's a lot. It's in harmony with our emergence profile from our impression. We can then, once that's down, take your X-ray, verify the abutment. You can then go in and try in your crown like you would any other crown, cement that in. It's then, the restoration has a screw channel, so I can retrieve that out, remove that cement, polish it all up, and then cement it in. So it's now a retrievable screw, cemented in crown. Any misfit will be taken up by the cement as well. So that's quite a nice way to do our restorations. Okay. We did work on, in our residency, the free quarter, and I think, we're going to get closer and closer to what we're talking about with the digital patient, in that this data will be more and more integrated in with our design software. So be able to take a digital pantograph like this and, eventually get more accurate mandibular motion replicated in our digital articulators, and that should then allow for more accurate restorations. Okay. As far as designing occlusion, I think CAD-CAM makes it so much easier. I hated waxing up at residency, I still do. So doing it digitally for me is a lot more fun. So for those that have done a Dr. McCorris course or similar, this was 2 days worth of work to wax 6 teeth. So we've done this virtually here. I presented this at an anthology meeting in front of Dr. McCorris, and I think most of the people in the room had done this exercise and felt the pain of having to do it by hand, and to sort of get this done in under half an hour and looking pretty good, getting our function correct, still picking up all our spots and dots as we want to, doing it a lot more easier, a lot less swearing and heartache than when I'm doing my own wax ups. For me, I'd rather type because my handwriting sucks. This is kind of the same sort of thing. You can, as long as you've got the knowledge from having done it, and your analog thinking, I think digital works very well. We can then go through and adjust all those spots, make sure they're exactly the right contact pressure, equilibrates it all out for us. we check our function, and then we can go ahead and basically generate an STL file and then mill it, cast it, press it, do whatever we want from there. Yeah. So we'll wrap that up a bit. Getting up to time. So where's dentistry headed? Look, I think most dentists will have a chairside scanner. I think we'll get more and more to simple in-house production, small mills and 3D printers. As long as we understand their limitations, I think they're great tools. I think it'll become cheaper, it'll become more accurate. I think there'll be a lot more sort of smaller labs, like group labs, and then they might send out to larger sort of milling centres in regions. So I think costs will decrease, accuracy will increase, number of materials and indications will change, and I think we'll be able to do a lot more dentistry, hopefully a bit cheaper for patients with more ease. So digital dentistry can improve accuracy, save time, reduce costs, be durable and aesthetic, but it can be expensive up front, can become obsolete very quickly, so be careful in your purchases, I think. Again, all this digital stuff, it's just another tool. Okay, it's still the dentist that drives it, or the lab tech that drives it, but in the end, the dentist is responsible. So you must develop your own skills to, I guess, use it with optimal effect. Weigh up what's possible versus what's practical. Okay. Just be careful, there may be a tendency to ignore accuracy, durability, and scientific rationale in favor of convenience and price. So be very skeptical, really investigate it, hunt around, look online, check forums before you jump into a lot of this tech. Happy for you guys to message me. Best way is probably via Facebook if you have any questions on it. But yeah, I think just be a bit skeptical and wary going into things. They are big purchases, a lot of these. They're excellent tools, but they've got to be used correctly and they have to fit into the way you work. So yeah. And the other beauty of thinking it like a modular style, which I do, as you scale up, you can basically include more technologies or include more variation in your workflow, and basically move things in, move things out. For mine, that's why I go for, my benchtop scanner, my intraoral scanner, the design software. The milling and manufacture will change a lot more. And so I don't want to invest in that because that's going to be obsolete a lot faster. So, and then basically the production is outsourced. So that keeps us as adaptable as we want and lets us keep moving. So with that, guys, thanks for listening. Well, this morning, your afternoon. I hope a few of you have cracked a beer already. And yeah, if any of you are looking for a trip down to Sydney, we've put our World Congress off. It was meant to be this October. It'll now be next year. So welcome to come down and visit. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Giblin. I will direct you to the Q&A tab there. And it might be easier that you just read the questions.
Yep. How do you decide where to place the occlusal plate in digitally? It's from Alan. You have the video open. How does the system know where to split the occlusal plane? Really, that's up to our technician to really place that. For mine, the basis of all, I guess, occlusal plane or anything is the aesthetic edge, the anterior teeth. Once you work out where your incisal edge needs to be, you kind of work out where that occlusal plane goes. And then I'll generally, depending on how much restorative we have to do on each tooth, it will vary it from there. But generally it starts from where the anterior aesthetic edge needs to be. So working that out first. Ray says, where are we with digital dentures? I've played around with those a little bit, but I don't think, when I was working on it, it wasn't quite there. And again, a lot of those printed materials, I don't know. The problem with printing is you're doing a pretty rapid light cure versus a lot of the traditional materials, heat polymerized or chemical polymerized. I think there's limitations there at this stage as far as longevity. Just the cross-linking of those materials, I don't know if they're going to be as durable yet. I think some of the ones where they're milling out, pre-polymerized resin, they're milling them and then gluing teeth in. I think that's an option, but then you may be losing on some aesthetics, or, there might be problems with junctions. Now, I don't have as much experience for them, but, I think they will get there eventually. But with them, again, the big thing with dentures is dentures are reliant on tissue compression, to hold in. And so I don't know if we're going to get there with doing intraoral scanner, which is, it is your perfect mucostatic impression is an intraoral scan. But when it comes down to it, you're not border molding or anything with a digital scanner. So you're still going to have to do your traditional impressions, then digitize it. So it's kind of that second workflow. If you've got your border molding and everything correctly, I think, we've seen with Avident, some of their base plates, everything, they fit unbelievably. And then you're putting teeth on top. Again, it has to come down to how it works. Is it cost effective? Some of them I've seen are quite expensive compared to the traditional workflow. Longevity wise, are the resins up to it? So for me, I think they're getting there. I'm just going to give them let it run for a bit longer before I think I'll let it run a bit longer before I jump into the digital dentures too much. But for ours, we're still waxing up and doing it traditionally. But yeah, I'm excited to get into that stuff a bit more. The other side of it is probably, getting my lab to buy into that. They're not a big fan of dentures anyway. So do they want to go and up tool for all that stuff? We've got a 2-person lab and they're flat out, and it's really, they just couldn't be bothered. So I think it's something we'll get into down the track, but yeah. All right. Hey, Rick and Sean. Steve Haney, is the infrared option of benefit in diagnosis of cracked teeth? Hey, Dr. Haney. Yes, it does. Like one of the tools I use a lot is transillumination, obviously a light probe in diagnosing cracked teeth. This is the NERI feature on the iTero scanner. It's basically light transmission. And so you can pick up the cracks, not so much afterwards, but when you're actually scanning, when you're seeing it live, you can actually see the light stop at the cracks. So in my experience, you can use it to help diagnose cracks with that 5D. So it is good. Marcus Torrey says, did you pick up those lower wax teeth with conventional, or just send them back to the lab? Not sure what he meant with that one. So with those, we basically, we didn't pick them up again. We just pressed them and went from there. I think that's the case.
I think what he was looking at is one case where on the maxilla, the teeth were in blue, and on the lower, they were in red. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So do we pick those lower wax teeth with conventional, or just send them back to the lab? So those blue milled, that was actually what we pressed. That's a casting resin. So we fitted it onto the model and then re-waxed the margins and then just pressed that. So that's how we did. I think that answers the question. As I said, we've got our own lab in-house, so sending it back to the lab's walking 10 feet. So yeah. Brian Brodeen, what mill do you mill in-house? I don't. I outsource everything, just so I don't have to worry about looking after them. With that large amount of full arch splendid implant impression copings, doesn't the draw have to be perfect? How do you do that? Yes, it does. I use an internal hex implant, so I don't use a conical connection for any of my stuff. I use internal or external hex, so the path of draw is a lot more flexible for that reason. Yep, you have a lot of troubles with, I like working to the platform as much as I can. I try to avoid doing abutment level. So I pick my implants based on that. So I'll use oftentimes the Southern coaxis implants, the X-Hex. And so it actually angles the implant platform to where I want it to be. And so it's actually built in. So the path of draw, when I place my implants, I'm sorting my path of draw out at that point. I'm just cheap, so I don't have to buy abutments. But yep. So, but yes, it is an issue. Samra, for milling versus casting of the titanium bar, if there are issues at trying with fit of the bar, then does the whole bar need to be remade? Well, casting we just don't do anymore because that was, you had to basically cut and solder them pretty much every time and then look at spark erosion and all that to make them fit. So I don't know if anyone's casting bars that big, and you wouldn't cast titanium either. Just doesn't cast very well. But for milling, if there's a bad fit, yes, I would then go back and check what was the issue. Was it my model? So I'd check my verification jig again. If the model's accurate, I'm happy to cut the bar, resolder that with a laser weld and then go again. Or the lab, if it was a lab mistake, I'd say remill the bar. You know, usually it'll be their cost. So that's probably my two options there. Paul, howdy, Hasegawa. What software are you importing your data into for digital treatment planning, wax ups and articulation? I'm using 3Shape for all that. So it's had digital smile design for a long time. I think before the Coachman brothers developed their apps and all that, they had a bit of a partnership with 3Shape. So it's been included in there for probably 5 years. So that's what I've been doing it that way. So I pretty much use 3Shape for everything. They always sting you every year with the licensing fees. I'm still looking at Exocad, but I think they've just started doing the same thing. So yeah, basically 3Shape for most things, but it's the 3Shape lab software. I think that was the question just then popped up from somewhere. It looks like Implant Studio because Implant Studio is a light version of the lab software. So what kind of software is Core 3D Centers? I said it's just basically 3Shape. They just basically put their badge at the back of it. So they were the guys that, as I spoke about, they are a big lab down, or they're internationally a big lab. And so they have their own, they basically sell the software, the scanners, everything. So they basically are a milling center. They sell the software, the scanner, and then basically you do a deal with them and they do all the milling for you. So that's all that was, just some branding. So, yep.
All righty.
All right.
That's it for questions. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. I'm glad we got a pretty solid connection to the other side of the world here today.
Exactly. We went straight through the middle, mate. We went the express route.
Absolutely. All righty. I'm going to take over sharing my screen, just share the PowerPoint here so people can see upcoming webinars, etc. Dr. Giblin, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you in Chicago next February.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it too. Easy. Thank you, guys. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
See you then.
All righty. For those of you that wanted some more information about upcoming webinars, this PowerPoint has some flyers that will have the information. You can use the QR codes there to go straight to the registration links. If you find that that QR code isn't working for you, just go to washingtonagd.org and you'll be able to look for the Washington Academy of General Dentistry Stay Home, Stay Healthy CE logo, and you should be able to navigate through there to find the webinar you're looking for. If you missed a webinar or you'd like to share a webinar with someone, go to YouTube, Washington Academy of General Dentistry, or you can get to that link via the washingtonagd.org webpage and just click on the YouTube link there. For CE credit, you will be receiving your CE credit within the next couple of days. That CE credit will be sent to the email address that you registered at. It will come via PDF format. It's not personalized. Just put your name on that PDF form. Save that for your records just in case there's trouble down the road. AGD members, we will be submitting your AGD credits. CE credits directly to the AGD that should show up on your transcripts within the next 2 to 4 weeks. Like to thank the International Academy of Nathology for putting today's speakers together. Really appreciate Dr. Paul Hasegawa, Dr. Carl Hoffman for helping us out, rounding everybody up. Tomorrow we have our Arkansas AGD Day. Strongly encourage you to watch Dr. Rick Robley. He's going to be doing a presentation called The Next Generation of Interdisciplinary Dental Facial Therapy. It's digitally empowered with an airway focus. So he's got some 30-year cases that he's going to present to us. Should be a pretty exciting stuff for those of you that know Dr. Robley and the quality of orthodontics he does. It's just amazing stuff. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to Thursday, the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics. We've got 3 speakers there, Mark Douglas, Kim Parlett, and Ian Tester. Thank you guys for joining us on Thursday. We appreciate it. I want to remind you that Dr. Manu Karbash is doing a presentation Friday, COVID-19, Getting Ready for Practice, Evolving Systems. This is a good one for your team members to attend. Implant Study Club continues Friday afternoon with Dr. Yassine. And just a reminder that we will be putting together some more webinars for next week. We just don't have the registration information up and ready to go yet, but check back and that will be available probably in the next couple of days. Thank you, University of Washington School of Dentistry CE Department, for handling our CE credits. Thank you to the Canadian Academy of Restorative Dentistry and Prosthodontics for pushing our emails out in Canada. We'd like to thank Pierce County Dental Society, Snohomish County Dental Society, and Seattle King County Dental Society for your support. Thank you to our corporate sponsors, Comet USA and Patterson Dental. Appreciate everything you've done for us, helping us out with this. Just a reminder, if you're interested in our Master Track program, we still have a few spaces available. That our 2020 and 2021 Master Track has a really great lineup that includes some of the speakers you've seen on our webinar series. Very cost-effective CE. We did some rollback pricing. So for 4 sessions of 28 hours per session, it's now, instead of $5,500, it's $4,000 for those sessions. So yeah, payment plans are available. Please take a look at that. Would love to have you. It's just been a great program that Dr. Gary Hayamoto put together years ago, and we're continuing that. With that, mentioning Dr. Gary Hayamoto, thanks to our panelists today, Dr. Gary Hayamoto, thank you to our Executive Director, Valerie Bartoli, and thanks to our webmaster, Dr. Pressett. From the Washington Academy of General Dentistry, we'd just like to say thank you, stay home, stay healthy, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, and a big thank you to you, Tim.
You're welcome, and I'm gonna stop sharing, and then let's just end this meeting. Hey,
Thanks, Tim.
thanks a lot. Good to see you again. We'll talk soon, eh?
All righty.
Bye-bye.